So I spent 72 hours with the Galaxy Z Fold 6, and here are my thoughts. But first, let's talk about the new and noteworthy features, and on the surface there might not seem like much of them. This is an iterative update. Samsung's still the king of foldables right now. We only have competition from two other brands here in North America, which is the OnePlus Open and the Pixel Fold. But anyway, let's get right into it. So the first thing is, the cover screen is slightly larger. Well, it's wider, but shorter. It's actually a welcome addition. I didn't notice it being much shorter, but I definitely noticed that 0.1 inch difference. It might not sound like much on paper, but in reality it does. Before, the Fold series was just unusable to me. I bought every single Fold since the Fold 3, and I always loved it until I realized how much I hated that cover screen. Once I realized that I didn't enjoy using this phone when it was closed, the entire experience just fell apart. I just couldn't deal with how narrow the cover screen was. I couldn't type properly. With the Fold 4, I only used it for 1 week, and I already knew that I wasn't going to enjoy using this phone unless I had it unfolded the entire time. And that's honestly not something that you will do. Believe it or not, even though this is a foldable, you use the cover screen a lot. This here, though, it's now passable. I still wish it was a little bit wider though, but I'm finally able to type my messages without having to stop what I'm doing and concentrate on aiming my large fingers at this tiny screen now. I still think OnePlus nailed the cover screen. That cover screen was perfect. It was just wide enough to use the phone one-handed and still feel like you're getting a full phone experience, even if the phone isn't opened. Next thing though, there is some slightly different material choices. I think the matte metal on the frame and on the hinge looks and feels a lot better. Samsung did a really good job making the metal and glass feel similar. It just makes it a much more cohesive design. I also find the Fold easier to grip too. It even makes me feel more confident using this phone without a case, and for a phone that is already heavier and thicker than regular phones out there, even though this version is thinner and lighter than last year's, this is a phone I really want to use caseless. Speaking of thinner and lighter though, I would say that this is probably the biggest reason to upgrade. The weight reduction is huge. I can actually hold this phone comfortably all day without it hurting my wrist, and it doesn't weigh down my pants anymore when it's in my pocket. It almost feels like it's a regular phone when it's in my pocket too. It just makes me want to use this phone out and about much more. We're starting to get to the point where you're not really making much sacrifices choosing a regular phone versus a foldable, at least in terms of the overall girth and weight. So we're heading in the right direction. For reference, this is actually the same weight as the iPhone 14 Pro Max. One thing that's different too is the hinge. Not in a good way. It doesn't feel as smooth as I remember. It feels tighter and looser when I'm opening it. It's just not smooth tension throughout. Like some parts when you're opening it feels tighter, then it gets looser, then tighter again. The tension just quite isn't there. And even when I'm like opening it, it just feels like a bit tight. It's a bit difficult to pry it open. And there's a bounciness to it too. I noticed this when I had it on a table and I had a YouTube video playing and I was just trying to adjust the angle. I noticed as I tried to tilt it downwards, it was popping up on its own. This device is brand new. Maybe there is a break-in period, so I don't know if things will smooth out. I'll just have to report back as I use it more. The displays too, I was a bit bummed about. I mean, they're fine. They're using Samsung-made AMOLED panels and they're some of the best in the business. But why aren't we getting the anti-reflective coating like we saw in the S24 Ultra? At least on the cover screen, this is just as reflective as all the phones out there, and Samsung made great strides with how awesome that S24 Ultra was, where you're not really losing any sharpness, but then it's also cutting down on glare too. I mean, for an $1,800 phone, this should have got the same anti-reflective coating as we're getting in Samsung's other flagship, the S24 Ultra. So that was a big letdown. That was something I was actually really hoping for, especially where I live. And the main display, the one inside, is even more reflective than the one outside. So it's kind of a bummer. And because there is like a slight graininess to it because of that screen protector, it does kind of take away from some of the premiumness when you're using this outdoors and you're seeing the reflective nature showing up on the screen. That's something I really hope that they would fix. Like the OnePlus Open has an anti-reflective layer on the screens when it's open, and it just does a much better job than this. So that's something that they really should have fixed this generation. Like, Samsung's not the only player in the foldable industry anymore, so these little things I want to start seeing get better. Also, what I've noticed is the brightness on the cover screen is actually brighter than the main display inside, and you really notice it when you're outdoors, especially right now where I am in South Florida. We're in the peak of summer right now, so the sun is at its brightest and hottest. I found both screens usable outdoors though, but I just wanted to mention that. On the bright side, though, the Crease is much better than previous generations. It might not really look like it here, and especially since I don't have any other foldable to compare it to, but it really makes a big difference. In most situations, I'm not noticing the Crease. Sometimes when I'm watching a video at an off angle, I can kind of see it, but it's not as distracting as it was before. I mean, this phone's still new though; it's only 3 days old, so I got to see how the Crease will do over time. Now that all that stuff is out of the way, overall, it's similar to what we've had before. But if you've never used a Fold before and you've actually been thinking about it, the overall experience of using this phone has been amazing. The first day with it, I was hyper fixated on some of the gripes that I mentioned earlier, but the more that I use it, the more I see this fitting into my life long term. Sometimes for quick tasks, it's nice to have a small screen where you could quickly look something up, fire off a quick text, email, or take a quick call, if people still do that these days. But when I sit down, this tablet experience has been great. And now that the screen is wider, it makes it feels much more like I'm using two separate devices, like when it's folded and when it's unfolded than I did before. I watch a lot of YouTube on my phone, and this makes it much more engaging. At first though, because of the aspect ratio, I was wondering if it's even worth having a fold and if videos were larger than a typical phone. But they are. Once you're unfolded and you turn it to landscape, you're getting a 7-inch display, and that's much larger than any other phone. Take a look at the difference between the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the CMF Phone 1. It's a pretty big difference when you're watching YouTube videos. Also, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 on the entire OS just flies. It's Android, so you'll see a drop frame here and there if you're looking for it, but overall, everything runs so buttery smooth, and it all feels so polished too. And I did some gaming with this too. I played some Call of Duty Mobile, and this phone didn't really get warm to the touch, and I retained a really high frame rate throughout. Also, the touch response time and the touchscreen itself was incredibly fast. Latency was low. I don't use any type of aim assist or anything like that when I'm playing, but it was really easy to aim with this phone. Even if you're not a gamer, the touch sampling rate and the touch responsiveness on this screen adds a lot to that polish that I mentioned earlier. So, battery. In my 3-day use, it's been okay. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think we can start expecting the same level of battery on foldables as we would get on some of the other flagships. Even this $200 phone I was ending the day with 30% after a full day's use. With the Fold 6, at the end of a long day when I'm using this phone a lot, if I start the day off at like 8 a.m. and my day ends at midnight, I am ending the day with like 7% battery life. And that's with me like making an effort not to charge at all. Usually when I'm just using my phones normally, if I'm in front of a charger, I would just top it up really quickly. Or if I'm in a car, I would use the wireless charger. If I'm using Android Auto, it'll do some trickle charging there. But because of the review period, I am trying to not charge the phone at all, just to see what battery life would be like in a stressful situation. But still, I'm able to get through an entire day. I mean, just barely though. But the phone is still learning my usage patterns though, so that could change by the time I do a full review on this phone. And one last thing I want to mention is the Galaxy has a competent ecosystem. These Bud Pro 3s are fantastic, amazing sound. The transparency mode on this is fantastic. The noise canceling is great. And there's this new adaptive mode that uses AI to analyze your surroundings and the ambient noise and tune it to that effect. And they're really comfortable too. These deserve their own video. And same with the Galaxy Watch. So far, I've been incredibly impressed. The design looks a lot better in person, and with this new processor, Android Wear finally feels as fast as a flagship phone. And also my Galaxy Book 4 Edge 2, things are finally starting to talk together where I can quick share, copy and paste, open apps, and even switch to the buds back and forth. It takes some time to set up. Let me know if you want to see a deeper video on that. So yeah, it's just a combination of all of these things is why I'm enjoying this phone. So even though the form factor on the surface doesn't really look that much different, the fact that it's lighter alone, like I said, makes this phone a lot more enjoyable to use. There's been some occasions where I had to take care of some tasks where I would typically want to grab a tablet or a laptop to do, and I was able to do it just fine on this too. So I find that when I'm using a foldable, I'm a lot more productive. So, but if you guys are thinking about pre-ordering this phone, I have links down below. They are affiliate links, so I will benefit from these. So you'll get up to $150 off and 25% off if you bundle the Fold 6 along with the Buds 3 Pro and along with the Galaxy Watch Ultra. And right now it's up to $1,200 in trade-in with a Fold 5. What I did, to be honest, is I just bought one on eBay for $500. Just keep looking, you'll find one, and then I'm just going to trade that one in. But yeah, so far I'm really liking the Fold 6. I really just wanted to cover this, but I can see this really fitting into my lifestyle now. A lot of it has to do with the entire ecosystem now. I think that's going to be the video I want to make next. So sound off in the comments if that's something you want to see. All right, thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.